Lovely, thanks, Jo. It wasn't mean at all. It's rather disconcerting now because I can just see my face in front of me as I'm talking. Also, our internet connection can be a tad dodgy sometimes. So if I completely freeze, Jo, please tell me. And I've also asked Jo to just tell me when to stop talking, because I quite like to talk and don't realise how long I do it for. So as Jo said, my name is Kath Aegis and I'm in the Eastern Parish. I'm a secondary school teacher and have been involved with children's liturgy at our church for, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe about 8 or 9 years. There used to be a few of us. So when I first joined, there were probably about 4 of us. And unfortunately, that dwindled down to just me. I hope that's got nothing to do with me. But just, you know, everybody has very busy lives and lots to do. And I think others just felt they couldn't keep it up. And funny, Jo, you should say about how sometimes when we don't feel we want to do children's liturgy at all, and I've sometimes felt that a bit because, you know, when you're the only one, it can feel like a bit of a burden. But my driving force has always been that I just feel children should have their special part of Mass and something which is just for them. And the parish, you know, always love it when they come back in from the liturgy and come up onto the altar and talk about what they've done. So in terms of children's liturgy during lockdown, when it first happened at the beginning, I didn't have any plans to run it at all. And I found out about the CAFOD virtual children's liturgy because I often steal a lot of CAFOD's resources to run the liturgy myself. So with my own children, I've got 3 children, 12 now, 12, 10 and 6. There's one of them behind me.
12.
Thank you. We joined it together. So we did it one Sunday and really enjoyed it. And then we did it another Sunday. And I'd actually sent an email out to the parents of a lot of people in our parish, a lot of the children, just saying, you know, this is a really nice resource. And then I was actually trying to think when I knew I was doing this tonight, why I decided or how I decided to start doing it myself. And I think I just thought, you know, if it was me doing it, then the children would just have that familiarity. The parents might feel more likely to join it. So I just literally set up a Zoom meeting on Sunday at the normal time when Mass would be at 9 o'clock, sent an email out, and then it continued throughout all of lockdown, pretty much every Sunday. A lot of Sundays during the summer holidays, because the summer holidays in some ways weren't really the summer holidays, were they? It was just kind of a continuation of lockdown, and it's continued since then. And it can vary in terms of how many families will have attending. The norm is probably about 7. Sometimes it could be more than that. I think especially since churches have reopened and some families are managing to get to Mass, somewhat ironically, because I'm doing the children's liturgy, I don't really get to go to Mass. I think I get so focused on that, I forget to try and book a place, and then it's too late. And it's a bit, the timing's a bit short between doing this and then getting Mass. So yes, the numbers can vary, but since churches have reopened, they have gone down a bit. But we do have a core of definitely 5 or 6 families who come along every week. In terms of the session itself, I tend to run it the way we would normally run it. So it follows that same format, which I think is lovely for the children, because again, it's that familiarity. We, you know, have our welcome, and then we have the reading, and then sometimes I might get them to do some sort of activity. Sometimes we might talk. Once again, CAFOD have just been brilliant because, you know, they've had so much on their website. So I've been able to play little videos or songs. And the response has been great, even though there aren't a huge number of families attending. The response I've had back from parents has just been how much they've appreciated it and how much the children enjoy it. I think, you know, I've known how important it is for me to do it for the children. I've sometimes wondered how much the children get from it, because some of them, you know, are quite little. Their parents have told me that you know, they love seeing one another. They like the fact that, I guess, it's still as it would have been, or as close to what it would have been that we would have had on a Sunday. You know, it's that coming together. It's something that's just for them. And personally, I love it. You know, the art, I have to say, some Saturday tea times when I think, oh no, I haven't sent the email out about the liturgy, and you know, and I might be quite tired on a Sunday morning, but there isn't one Sunday that I don't come away for it not feeling delighted that I have it. And I say to them, and I totally mean it, I say, do you know what? This is going to be one of the highlights of my days, because, you know, I know for all of us, one of the reasons we do children's liturgy is because we like children and we enjoy being with them. And even though, of course, it isn't the same, you still get a really strong sense of that, even doing it through Zoom. In terms of, I suppose, the safety aspect of it, you know, I'm also a scout leader, and of course we've been doing our scout meetings on Zoom, so I was able to look at the guidance we were being given there in terms of how to run this safely. So I don't have any sort of chat function on, not that it's, you know, some of the children are little and wouldn't be able to use it, but I disable that, and also that just keeps them really focused in the liturgy, because there's something else I'm involved with, you know, or have seen sometimes when chat is there, that can distract them a bit. Their parents are always, if not beside them right on camera, you know that they're there with them. They're in a family room, so they're not by themselves in a room. You know, they're dressed appropriately, and you know, so those safety aspects are there. I'm sure, Claire, you'd be able to tell me if there are other things as well that could make it even safer. So yes, it ends up lasting for about half an hour usually, which is great. With the timing on Zoom is the usual 40-minute limit, and I find that that's enough. You know, we've done various little things, like this week I got them to decorate a template of a bauble and put a message on it that hopefully they're going to post to me, and I'm going to send to a care home somewhere in Beeston, because we were thinking about this idea of, you know, how we prepare for the birth of Jesus, and thinking about others, and the idea of preparation of Advent. So we've done little things like that. I feel that it's going to get more and more Christmassy as the Sundays of Advent go on. So we had lots of, you know, things on the head appearing, and Christmas jumpers and all sorts. But it's also lovely that aspect, we can keep that aspect of Advent in mind as well. If they're not being able to go to church, and I know a couple of them might not necessarily be at a Catholic school, so it just keeps the focus on the meaning of Advent at this time as well. I'm not too sure what else I might need to say, Joe. Do you just sat here and talked?
No, it's been really interesting. Feel free to add any questions, everyone, into the chat. One question came to mind as you're speaking there, Kath, is what challenges did you find when you're starting this up? Because imagine there'll be quite a few people that beginning point, going like the unknown really about starter? Or what challenges did you face at first?
I think there's the technological challenge. So we had, I think it was about 2 months ago, we had a power cut. So the whole thing just went right in the middle of the liturgy. Now, luckily, I'm friends with some of the mums who were on there, so we were able to kind of get this chain of text, and then I was able to, send an actual email. There's times when it's frozen, there's times when the sound hasn't worked properly, but I think unfortunately we're all so used to that now, because we have to do so much online, that hasn't been as much of a challenge. That it's just we just take it as it's just something that happens. Other challenges, I think sometimes, well, actually, yes, any parents of young children will be able to, parents of any age children, because I do it with my own children, and obviously I'm never on mute, and therefore my children are not on mute. So there have been some children's liturgies where an argument is pretty much broken out behind me as I'm trying to, my hand and tell them to be quiet. But, again, I just, at the end of the day, I think, well, I know as a parent that it's actually quite nice sometimes, not in a horrible way, but to see that happening with someone else, because you think, oh, it's not just my family.
Normal.
So, that actually, thinking about it, has probably been one of the biggest challenges. But this is why I'm thankful I've never had to teach my own children, because of course it's always completely different when they're there with their parent. But actually, that's another thing that's been really lovely. So my eldest is 12, and of course normally wouldn't come into the children's liturgy, but she's been here for all of it. And another friend of hers from school, who's also in year 7, he's come along to it. And then actually thinking about it, there's another lad as well. So actually, that's been really lovely, because it's as much for them as it is for the younger ones. And obviously, it's leading me to think of another challenge, but I know we used to have this in our parish anyway, because there's just one group for the children's liturgy, because there's one leader, managing to sort of direct it at the right level, let's say, because you've got older ones there and you've got younger ones there. But mostly that seems to work itself out, because, I suppose the way that you direct it can elicit slightly, more involved answers from some, and then slightly simpler ones sometimes from the younger ones. So, yeah, I think that's probably the challenges that spring to mind. There haven't been as many as maybe you might anticipate there would be, to be honest.
That's really good. That's really good to hear, actually. And so the flip side of that, what have been some of the really joyful moments? Have there been any particular activities that you've done within children's liturgy that have really gone, oh, that really worked, or that of a really lovely moment? I know you mentioned a couple a moment ago. Were there any that really stand out?
Yeah, I think actually, funnily enough, just last Sunday, wear a Christmas jumper. They all had Christmas jumpers on, and as I was saying to them, because it's really lovely, because at the start and at the end we just have a bit of a chat and we talk about how their week's been, and then we talk about what they're looking forward to. So I was picking up on the jumpers, and of course, as I mentioned them, one would just go off and come back and they'd have a Santa hat on, and another one would run off and they'd come back with reindeer antlers. And I honestly, I gave away from it with such a big smile, because you just really miss seeing them, and as you said, Joe, at the beginning, they give as much to us. I'd possibly argue more than we give to them. So it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I'd say one of the joys is just actually seeing them and kind of seeing them all together and knowing that they're getting to see some of their friends all together. I'm trying to think of another one that we did that worked really well. I haven't that was it. We used one of the CAFOD had just put an idea of I think it was that they were creating a picture, and they'd given an idea of a hymn to use. Now we do little bits of singing, so we have a candle song we sing at the start, and we sing a hallelujah. And CAFOD had given an idea of a hymn, so I just found it on YouTube and just played that whilst the children were doing their activity, and no one was talking, and they just had the hymn on, and I was just watching them all, and they were all just sat and, you know, busily drawing away or colouring away, and it was just really lovely. It felt like, as much as it can, it felt like being back in the church hall, and those lovely little moments where they're all just engrossed in what they're doing, and so that's made me think about trying to use music a little bit more, and on Zoom, you know, sharing the computer sound, now I've discovered, after my 12-year-old told me how to do it, is pretty straightforward to do. So that worked really well.
That's excellent. My final question of hopefully a very much, that's terrible English. Hopefully a much simpler question to answer. It would be, would you recommend others to give it a go?
Yes.
Yes. He phrased that.
Yeah, totally. And I think, sorry, it's coming out saying I'm a bit unstable. That was a definitive yes, by the way. And one thing I would just say is, you know, just not to be worried that it has to be polished, or that it has to be, you know, amazingly, you know, like the CAFOD one, they've got 3 different people set up and it's lovely, and they've got one guy playing the guitar, and it's all really seamless, and it's absolutely lovely to watch. And you know, I just think actually it can't be like that for everybody if you're just sat in your house. And I think it's just remembering that anything you give them will be really well received and will mean something, because it's just that idea that they haven't been forgotten. And I know there's lots of other ways to do that, and I'm sure people have, but it's that idea that no, this is your time and this is just for you, and we're going to dedicate this time. So yes, I would definitely recommend it.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Kath. I'm going to pause the recording now.
My role is the safeguarding coordinator for the Nottingham Diocese, and I know a couple of faces in the room, so hello to a couple of you who are our safeguarding reps. So unfortunately they will know everything I'm going to say, and they're probably going to think, oh, not her again. So apologies that you've ended up with me again. I can't see anybody else now, so I'm just wondering how I get, that's better. So thank you for the time I've got. So the only thing is, Joe, I'm going to have to say to you, could you go on to the next slide?
Absolutely, in full 2020 style of like.
Yeah, I feel you're my assistant. So my role is to make sure, amongst many other things, that activities in the diocese, everyone knows what they need to do to keep them safe. And sometimes that can come across as me coming in on top of all the enthusiasm and saying, you can't do that, or, oh, you've got to do it this way. So apologies that it can sometimes come across like that. But I think we have to be mindful of what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and at the root of it, the fact that you all give up your time says to me that you have children at the heart of it, and obviously at the heart of that we need to keep our children safe. And sometimes my background actually is as a teacher, 35 years, in fact, on the job. So I sort of have come across this in my teaching role and as a safeguarding coordinator. So my role is with adults and with children across the diocese, and possibly because I do recognise a few faces apart from my lovely safeguarding reps. I think probably I've met a few people in parish training. I think what has happened as a result of the lockdown and the closure of churches is that the Catholic Safeguarding Service, actually, I will say in fairness to them, really quickly got on the ball and sent us out some policy about video conferencing and safeguarding. And some of the things I'm going to say may not be directly relevant, because it sounds to me like mostly you are working with families rather than individual children. So if some of the things I'm saying you're thinking, well, we wouldn't really do that, that's because I just sort of thought of it with children in general. So everything I'm going to say relates to national policy. It's not my policy, it's not the diocese policy, and we have to follow it within some, with some reasonable interpretation as well. So if we can just go on to the first slide, Joe, I'll sort of try not to dwell too much on the really boring bits. I think, obviously, I don't need to tell you all the opportunities. You've just been talking about them, and we've just been talking about it in the breakout room. But I think we just need to think about risks. And interestingly, different people are contributing that because of their work experience or things that they know about video conferencing. And I think we just need to recognise that as good as Zoom or any other platform is, it also has risk. And for the most part, things don't go wrong. But when they do go wrong, it can be very difficult to sort out. And I think when I've done safeguarding training and talking about social media and learning platforms and so on and so forth, I think we just have to remember that once a child is on something like this, it's like we've got a window into their world, and that exposes them, not to you particularly, but to any rogue person who might try and get access to children. And unfortunately, those people who want to get access to children have many, many devious ways of doing it, which won't be obvious to you and to any of us. So we need to be just aware that we're sort of creating a window into their world. I once saw a photograph when it was somebody coming in to talk. It was actually when I was still at school about this. It's sort of like having a child in the house you tend to think of as safe. I mean, obviously that is a bit of an oversimplification, but it's almost like putting a billboard outside the house saying, Maisie lives here, she's 7 years old, she looks like this, she loves doing this, that and the other, and it's almost getting that information out there. So that's why we need to be a bit careful. So if we can just move on. I think really the most important thing is, and Joe and I discussed this before the meeting, because it's an activity involving children, it needs some risk assessment. Now that, obviously, when we think about risk assessments, we tend to think about buildings, but as those of you who know me heard me talk about this, or we've discussed it, or maybe you've already done it in your parish, a risk assessment with children specifically has to be around the activity itself. Now, we thought that if you decide to go ahead, that Joe's saying that he will put something together for you as a template, and therefore you're not reinventing the wheel, because I know risk assessments can cause quite a lot of anxiety. So, Joe, are you expecting Patricia Barton to enter the room?
Yeah, that's just popped up. They've come quite late to the meeting. We're almost finished, so I'm just going to send them a message.
Okay. Because I just wondered if you needed me to admit them or not. No. So Joe is going to put something together in terms of a risk assessment. The only thing I would say is if you decide to go ahead with this route, those of you who lead it will need to have a record of this risk assessment somewhere and sign it off, basically. The second thing is that, Joe, if you can just move you on to the next slide, please. The next thing is, just as again with any other children's activity, and this is particularly the case if their parents are not going to be there. So if their parents are always going to be with them, and it sounds a bit like with children's liturgy you may not need this, but if you're going to have children on their own, you must have a permission form. And the Catholic Safeguarding Service has come up with a form. It's readily editable for you, for your own parish. And if you're involved in any other activity involving children where they're on their own, rather than having their parents sitting with them, then this is the form to use. I've sent a copy to Jo. You can get one from me, and I have asked my administrator to put it on the website. I just haven't had time to check today whether she's actually done it. So anyone who's familiar with the website, it's in the safeguarding section with all the other permission forms and so on. It's a very simple form, and it's written specifically for now, really. So it's very appropriate. And again, you need to think about storing them, where you're going to store them. But if the parents are with them and on that screen the whole time, you don't need to worry about it. Okay, so should we go on to the next slide? Thanks. So obviously with children, we need to think about the age restrictions of the platform. Most of them are going to be using their parents, I would think, to be able to get on there. Now, we have, this might involve some questions, and I think probably if I just run through things, and then if you've got questions afterwards, it's either I or Jo, hopefully, anyway, we'll be able to answer them, and if we can't, we'll come back to you. I think what's really important, especially when you've got children on their own, is that you have a parish account. In other words, it's not your personal account. And there is a bit of a worry when you use Zoom from the free Zoom that you can get. There are very few security, there's very little security to protect people in getting involved. So you need to really have an account. The policy says that you should also use what they call an organisational computer. What that means would be using a parish computer. I think that might be a bit of a big ask for many parishes. I think as long as you have an account, I don't think we need to worry so much about the computer. But in an ideal world, that's what you would use. Somebody talked about WhatsApp groups and various things. Again, it's about how do you communicate with people. So you've got to be careful to not be using, your personal phone number, personal email addresses, etc. I've talked about permissions, and that's anybody under 16. Well, I'm assuming anybody coming to children's liturgy is going to be under 16. And you need to talk to parents about how to get onto the platform and what to do, and also give them information about who's going to be running the sessions and how to get in touch with them. Because in a way, what you're doing is creating children's liturgy, but in a different setting, and a setting that most people are not really familiar with. So if we just move on. Thank you. So I think it was Catherine said at the start about where. So they should be taking place in somewhere that's visible to others within the household, for example, not within their bedroom or within any other sort of closed spaces. So it needs to be in an area, and it doesn't really matter if people are coming and going. I mean, I'm sure we've all been on Zoom meetings where various cats have walked across the screen and as say children and people crawled across, and you see a cup of coffee come in from the side, which is always very nice. So, it's important really that this is a public space, because that's a protection for the child, but it's also a protection from the leader. And also, if by any chance anybody does get access, that bedroom can give somebody who is trying to get access to a child quite a bit of information about them. They can pick up from where they are. Secondly, just as you would have children's liturgy, you will know that there should always be two DBS checked adults who run the activity, and they should be familiar with safeguarding procedures and policies. Now, it could be that you have some familiarity with that because of a different role you have. Perhaps you're a teacher, or you work in social care, or whatever that is, or police, social services. after we finish these sessions, we may need to see whether there's something, whether I can set something up for anyone who hasn't done any training, and maybe I haven't got round to your parish, because I know we haven't been able to do that a huge amount, or certainly not in the last year, but even prior to that, there's been a limited number that we've been able to get to. So 2 adults, they should have a DBS and they should be familiar with safeguarding. And I'm hoping that doesn't immediately make you think, oh, that's it, I'm not going to do it. Because actually, that's what you would do with children's liturgy anyway. So hopefully it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Can we move on, please? Okay, rules of engagement. Now, again, I think, again, there's been reference to this. I think, again, somebody mentioned about dressing appropriately. So we don't particularly want them in their pajamas. We need them in something that's, you know, as if they were just coming out as they would on a Sunday or going to school or whatever. Really just talking through. And in fact, we were just in our breakout room talking to the children and finding out, what do they think about it? What do they want? So really just sort of starting off by telling them, how can you speak or participate? You know, how do they take turns with each other? How do you interact with others? It might be, if you've got a very small group, that's very straightforward. But particularly if the children are older in a different environment, you know, keeping an eye out for the way that the interactions are going. How and when they can leave the meeting, entering and leaving is important. You know, if they need to rejoin, being respectful to each other, not laughing at people, I suppose is what I'm saying. But also, and I think this is a really good thing to start off with, if there's anything in there that they are concerned about or anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, know to tell them what to do if that's the case. And really, in the first case, they get probably the best way to deal with that is to ask them to speak to their parents, then their parents make contact with you as the leader to explain what it is, or you arrange to speak to them with their parents. I wouldn't suggest doing it just one-to-one. I think better to involve the parent there. And that's why the parent needs to know how to make contact with you. Okay, shall we move on to the actual meeting itself? Okay, I haven't got a lot more. We've all been in a waiting room for this meeting. Lock the meeting once it's started. This is what you'll get on a Zoom account. And perhaps Joe might talk to you just a little bit about parish Zoom accounts when we finish. Try and put yourself in front of a neutral background. You just have to be a little bit wary, don't we? We all have to be aware of what's on the wall behind us, don't we? So same thing applies there. I think most of us have learned over a period of months now of using Zoom that muting the attendees just means you don't have the radio on in the background or the doorbell ringing or people's phones buzzing away. So it's not about not allowing people to speak, but explaining to them how to unmute themselves when they do want to speak. As you can see, I can't share this screen because I'm not the host of the meeting. So really only the host should be able to do this. If you have any consent to share screenshots, I think that's unlikely to be used, but you've just got to be careful that external people can't get involved. You need to keep away from personal information, not because anybody, I wouldn't have thought there's any issue with you or the children involved, but again, it's just in case you get somebody in the meeting who you're not aware of. And actually this happened to me today. Not that there was somebody rogue, but I had to be in a meeting, a national meeting this afternoon. But what happened was I had to be somewhere else. So I was dialing in, listening to the meeting while I was somewhere else. And there was a lot of concern about who this unknown person was. And actually they phoned me to say, who are you and what are you doing in the meeting? So it's about keeping an eye on that, because it is relatively easy for people to get access even to what seems to be something quite secure. So again, it's about not posting personal information. So email addresses, birthdays, phone numbers, always in which an external person could end up having access to a child. And then finally, so go back to my phone call, don't accept anyone who hasn't been invited to the meeting, so you don't know. So that's something that needs to be thought about beforehand. Anything that's inappropriate, you need to keep a record of that and respond to it. In other words, if there's something, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, you know, a child who you would expect to be there isn't there, or you observe something in the background, to be honest, first line of call is to your safeguarding rep. If you can't get hold of your safeguarding rep, or if they feel they want to contact me directly, or you want to contact me directly, then that's fine. Do that. My mobile number's on the website, and all the safeguarding reps would know how to make contact with me. And really important, when the meeting closes, the platform should close to everyone. So nobody other than the facilitator should stay online at the end. There's always that thing, isn't there? In any physical activity, there's always a few people hang about at the end for a little chat, and that's great, but it shouldn't be the children ending up in a one-to-one. And that's really, for protection both ways. I think my final thing to say would be, if you're going to do this, and it is a really good tool, just be aware that there are pitfalls which are not necessarily about the activity, but about other people getting access to it. And it is quite difficult to make it very secure, which is why you just need to think about the account that you use. And I would say, if I've got any advice, it is don't use a free Zoom account, because there's very little security with that. And that's me done. Hopefully that isn't too draconian, and it's useful.
Thank you very much for that, Claire. I'm sure do feel free to add any questions you might have for Claire or myself into the chat. As Claire said, so my role in the diocese is to enable mission and make things a little bit easier on the parish level. So I will be creating a kind of a guide for how to create a Zoom account and everything. And I've just been doing a little bit of research, and Zoom have changed their policy around waiting rooms and security thing for the free account. So I'm going to look at that into finer detail to see if we can do that. Regarding the paid accounts, I think they've started about works out about £10 a month. I think that's a good investment a parish can make into our children. And I'm sure if we had a whip around, if the parish have really struggled, we could get £1 each out of 10 parishioners each month to help support it. So I'll be giving advice about that. In a previous role of school chaplain, I became known as a risk assessment mentor, as I seem to really love doing them and helping people with them. So I want to take the strain out of the parish, and so those things will create templates so that they've kind of concerns and they've paperwork what are very, very important to make sure that we do, but sometimes can paralyze us because we're like, I don't know where to begin with this. Hopefully we can give you that starting push so that you can have all the good and important safeguarding and structure in place so that you feel confident when you're leading these things. So we'll be working on them, myself and Claire, and a couple of other dioceses, to make sure that they're robust and helpful, and we'll send them out and get feedback as well. And we're always happy to improve what we do. So I hope to have them before the start of the school Christmas holidays is my aim, really, next 2 weeks to get them sorted. So any...
Can I just say one other thing, Joe? Sorry, it's something I meant to say. I took it off the PowerPoint because I just thought it was death by PowerPoint, if not. And one thing I would just say is I would very strongly recommend that you avoid recording your session. That's whether you record it on audio or whether you record it on video or both, because you've got all sorts of GDPR problems if you start doing that. So I know somebody was saying that they record it, but that's not interactive. That's effectively a presentation. I think it was Martina said that, and that's fine. But it's if you've got people in the room, you start to get into all sorts of territory that, frankly, I would advise against, to be honest, just for your own sanity, if nothing else. Sorry, I forgot to say that.
Yeah, thank you very much for Claire. I wanted to mention that as well. I'm glad you highlighted that. Okay, if anybody have a question, you feel free, either you can shout or wave if it's one that, rather than typing it. Do not worry if a question comes to you. My email address is joe.hopkins@dioceseofnottingham.uk. You can, or if adult formation. Oh, go for it, Claire. Just seen you've unmuted.
Sorry, I was waving, but I suddenly thought you're on big screen, so you might not be able to see us all. We were talking about the recruitment of catechists for children's liturgy being sometimes quite challenging. And one thing that we have done, by virtue of the fact that we've been doing leading children's liturgy for so long between our group of catechists, that we have our own grown-up children who come along and support the leadership of that. Obviously, they're not all old enough to lead independently, but they do have an interest in that that extended role. So one thing that we are passionate about and happy to support with, if it's of use to you, is the way that we can form young people as young leaders to hand on this ministry. It's my daughter who's sitting behind us here, but I won't show you her because she's in a dressing gown. We'll be breaching all the safeguarding rules. She's 16 and is, she loves to come and help at the liturgy and to take the lead, and has recently become a young Eucharistic minister with one of her friends as well. So the more opportunities we provide, the more I feel that we will have no problem in recruiting and extending that ministry, as long as we've got provision for those young people. And I think that because we've got, we've got some young people in parishes that are either too old for the liturgy or too young for a youth group, or there's nobody to run both, that would be something that might really offer them some sort of potential and, and to be able to hand that on. So please keep us posted if you want any support in doing anything that way.
Definitely, Claire, I will be in touch, because I think that's definitely something that I'm passionate about, that kind of building up the next generation. I think is really, really key. I know myself, I first got involved in parish catechesis after I finished my confirmation at 14, and that's led me to where I am today. Yeah. And I think sometimes we might have parents who'd be happily to be that DBS trained one, but the thought of maybe leading the actual activities and session is what freezes them. So they can be there to support with the safeguarding side, and we have our young ones helping with the leadership thing. And I know, Claire, you might want to add anything. Do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say you've always got to have two DBS checked adults. I mean, I think also if you've got, a 16-year-old should be DBS checked, actually.
Yeah, she is as a Eucharistic minister. She didn't turn 16 until July, so she actually was commissioned when she was 15 and then had to have her DBS done after that.
Oh. So, I mean, we do DBS checks for 16-year-olds, and that means that they can, step in and be one of the leaders. So, yeah, I mean, I think the more you can have trained up, the better, because it means that you've got quite a resilient group then, so that when people go on holiday or they're ill, the whole thing doesn't sort of fall apart, or people are saying, oh, can we go ahead when there's only one? Well, I could get into that, and I won't bore you all with my speeches about children's liturgy and DBS and what have you. But I think what's most important really is, DBS is just a snapshot in time, isn't it? What's more important is that those people who are running the activity know what to do and know how to keep people safe. So that's why I think, we may need to look at something to support you all in this, in whatever you decide to do, for those people who haven't got the training or haven't had a chance to experience it through their other roles, be it school or wherever.
Yeah, I think that's very key. It's definitely something that I've picked up from this meeting, where we'll look to do that for the new year. We'll see what we can do for online training. So, and Claire was saying to me on Friday that I know sometimes the DBS process seems that big laborious, all the forms, and but you're saying at the moment they're getting turned around in a couple of days. Is that correct?
Well, once they get to us, I'm looking at two of our reps who are probably raising their eyebrows at this, and probably saying, "Don't start getting everybody doing DBSs." No, the burden is the actual application. Once you've put the application in, they are coming through very quickly, because there are generally less being done at the moment. I'm not going to pretend that there aren't a lot of forms to fill in, and there is, you have to have ID verification. But all our reps are on it, and we're getting DBS applications coming through all the time. The good thing is that with the new system we use now, when we sign you up for a DBS for the first time, or even if you're getting a renewal, you will automatically be, with your permission that is, we'll join the update service for you. So if you can say, Hillary's very happy. So if you agree to that, you shouldn't be doing it every 3 years, and that's a big incentive for most people. So we have made that change. So yeah, so the couple of days is once we receive everything. It is a bit of a faff before you get to that point, but unfortunately there's nothing I can do about that. That's DBS for you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Any final questions? I'm flicking through the camera to see if anybody jumps out. Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. I'm going to pause our recording again.